Thanks. Let's talk Big East. The same as before. Order of the Big East. Who's too high, who's too low, the whole 9 yards. Same thing we did with the other conferences. And your pick for the Big East, and pick for possible A's or Player of the Year, and so on and so forth. Jack, you're the Big East guy. Let's start with you.
Well, no surprise. I think Nova is head and shoulders above teams. I love this team. I mean, they're going to miss Robinson Earl. There's no question. And but it truly has been the last few years next guy up. And whether Eric Dixon is that guy or it's more committee. But Jermaine Samuels has gotten better every single year he's been there. And he became more of a go-to guy last year. So he's gonna be phenomenal. Obviously Gillespie's Gillespie, and he's one of the top point guards in the country. Yeah. What makes or breaks Nova's full advancement, in my perspective, is Brian Antoine, and what they lack in perimeter defense and quickness, and having a guy who can create a shot besides Justin Moore is that guy. And if he develops to the point is finally healthy, I think you're going to see a team that's really pretty fantastic. I mentioned that the next tiers down. I was dead wrong about UConn last year. I didn't think UConn would be the second best team in the conference, but they were. Their front line is really strong. I think they're gonna be play tough again. Hurley gets them playing amazing defense. I think this is the make or break year for Travis Steele at Xavier. If they aren't back, I think the natives are going to be very restless. But they have got a lot of returning people. They did very well in the transfer market. I think Xavier is going to be in the top 3 or 4. Seton Hall, I think, could be there. St. John's is a scary team. I know that they've had a lot of roster turnover, but their 2 best players are back, and Mike Anderson is creating he's getting his kind of players, and I think that they're gonna create a havoc, and I think they're gonna be in the tournament. The team that
NCAA?
Yep, I do. I think St. John's is going to be in the tournament this year. I think the team that is incredibly intriguing to me is Providence, because inevitably they'll start off badly again. And then, kind of come around the end of the year, and they always put themselves in a position, it seems like, where they've got a horrible seed going into the tournament. I'd like to see what they can do. There's a lot of teams in the mix there. I think Creighton's a year away, Jim. They're young. They're good, though. They're going to have a lot of talent, and ultimately, I think they're going to be good. Not even mentioning what Patrick's doing with Georgetown. But I do think the bottom of the league this year is, DePaul will turn it around, but not this year. I think Marquette's not going to be very good. I think they're going to be towards the bottom. So, it's a second tier that's going to be really, really interesting. And whether it's a 3 to 6 bid team bid conference will shake out with how that group does, in my opinion.
Okay, Tristan.
Yeah, so obviously I have Villanova number 1, but my number 2 pick is going to be St. John's. I am a huge fan. If I had to give my player of the year, I think it's going to be Julian Champagny. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's just a fantastic scorer. And what I love about him the most is that he comes to play every game. He's always aggressive. Even if he doesn't have great shooting nights, he's still going to put pressure on defenses, and that's what you need from a go-to guy. Posh Alexander, I think, is going to become a national star if his offense improves just a little bit. And we talked about the revamp of the roster. I think this roster they have is going to be better than last year's. Mm-hmm. All the transfers. Montez Mathis, he averaged around 16 points a game in the first 10 games of the last season for Rutgers when Geo Baker was out. And I think he's shown that he has the potential to be that key leading guard for St. John's. You add Tariq Coburn, who's a 40% shooter, Hofstra last year. You add Aaron Wheeler, who didn't really get a chance to play that much at Purdue because he was playing behind Travion Williams. Now he's going to be out on his own at St. John's and really get a chance to shine. He's a great athlete, great defender. You give Joel Soriano, who's a true center, something that St. John's hasn't had in a while. He's just going to be a really good interior defender for them. St. John's, I think, has the potential to really be not only a top 2 team in the Big East, but a top 20 team in the country. Mm-hmm. Really high on them. And another team I'm looking at is Seton Hall. If Jaden Ivey, who's the consensus number 1 breakout star, talked about this offseason, I think Kadari Richmond, transfer from Syracuse, has been number 2. Everyone has pegged him to be a national star. A guy who almost like a point forward of sorts, really good athlete, really good ball handler, can score it. I think he gives he's an upgrade over Shavar Reynolds from last year. Really good. Him along with Jameer Harris, who averaged 20 at the American. Jared Roden's going to be an all-conference player. Alexis Yetna is a solid post player from South Florida. They have a lot of potential too. I would not be surprised if Seton Hall surprises folks more. And then in UConn, their defense is great. The fact that they bring back the front court players, Isaiah Whaley and Tyler Pauly, is awesome. Adama Snogo is going to be a really good player. I'm just concerned that Tyrese Martin and RJ Cole aren't good enough to be the top 2 scorers on a team and have them be top 30 good next year. That's my concern with the Huskies. But I think defensively they'll stay in every game.
Yeah.
Okay. Cole?
Yeah, I think St. John's is probably the most interesting team in the conference, Tristan, for a lot of the reasons you mentioned. Champagne is clearly a lead dog kind of player. They've got 9 new bodies coming onto this roster this year, either recruits or transfers. So how all of those new faces blend in, now a lot of them are going to be deep bench guys, but how a lot of these new faces blend in with some of the the established players, Posh Alexander, for instance, how does it all come together is going to be, I think, a big key to how whether this is a team that's going to be a 10 or 11 seed, or could they be something like a 4 or 5 seed? I definitely think Villanova is the class of the conference, no doubt about that. I don't know what to make of Xavier yet. They have lost their identity as a program over the last several years. After Chris Mack, it sort of continued for a bit, and then it's kind of frittered away. And I know obviously being impacted by the schedule being so thrown off by COVID and so forth. But I don't know what to make of Xavier at this point. I could see Xavier being a 3rd place team in the conference, and I could see him being a 7th place team in the conference this year. But again, Villanova is the class to me. I think Connecticut's going to be in there. I don't think they're going to be the most aesthetically pleasing team in the conference, but I do think they're going to win some games.
Yeah. Okay. Xavier is an enigma, yeah, because they've got bodies, they've got talent, they've brought in some good transfers, they've had respectable recruiting, but they're just not playing. They're not playing together. And they started off very well last year, and then it's sort of like the program imploded on itself, and they just went to hell in a handbasket during the conference season.
They were impacted. The fits and starts with COVID certainly impacted them, but also I don't think their out of conference early on was that tough with them. They played some teams that they should have handled, but that's why I believe Steele's on the hot seat. I just think that he's got to deliver, and they're his guys. They had some people return, and there's talent. So there's a lot of talent on that team. It's just getting them to play together, and it'll be interesting to see if he's able to do it this year. But yeah, you're right, Cole. You thought of Xavier, it was hard nosed, it was in your face, it was a tough school and tough D. You just haven't seen that.
Yeah, and Jack, we saw Xavier playing in the tournament here in Jacksonville. I actually did the public address announcing for those games a few years ago. I think it was Chris Mack's last year, or the year before was last year. And that's exactly right. They were loaded with talent, and they played with an intensity that you expected to see out of a Sweet 16 team or a regional finals team or a team that could go to the Final Four. You see it. Sometimes you can tell that more when you watch a game in person than when you watch on TV. I don't think they have that personality established at this point under Steele. So maybe this is the year it happens, but if not, I think you're right. We could be seeing some changes coming.
Okay. Nova was the only Big East team in the top 25. A couple of the lesser polls had Connecticut. A really obscure poll had Connecticut Xavier. How many teams are deserving of top 25 in the Big East?
I think by the end of the year you could have two.
Two.
I mean, there's just so much balance
Two.
across. Yeah, two. I think St. John's will be in the poll by the end of the year. I think UConn will flirt with it. To Tristan's point, they're going to be in every game. I mean, they're rock fights. The point, it's in the 60s. And that's going to be a UConn game because they're going to have trouble scoring, but they're going to be tough inside. That front line. You mentioned the players. They got Akuka Cook is just another one. I mean, they're long, they're physical, they're a tough team. Two, maybe three, but I just don't think that. I think the perception out there in the world is the gap is so big. To the point earlier,
the gap in the conference or the gap in talent?
The gap in the conference, the perception of Nova and the rest of the teams. I think that there is a perception out there.
Well, isn't that an outlier though? I mean, over the last 8 years, the Big East has been on average the third or fourth best conference in the country based on results.
I agree. If you look at the metrics, that's traditionally been the case. But again, we're talking polls. I just think it's a perception thing. I think that's what you're going to see.
Okay. Tristan?
Yeah, I think it's going to be difficult for the Big East to get more than two because I think there's going to be a lot of scenarios where teams go 1-1 each week, where they'll win a game against someone, then lose a game at someone. Even the bottom tier, Marquette, I don't think has a ton of talent, but they're going to be feisty defensively. Georgetown's going to be hard-nosed. Butler returns everyone. We haven't talked about them much. They're going to be good enough to knock someone off. Outside of DePaul at the very bottom, there just aren't going to be a lot of bottom feeders where teams outside of Villanova can rack up 5-6 wins, which is going to be good enough to get you in the polls. And depending on what happens in the non-conference, if the Big 12 and SEC or even the Big 10 dominates and they all enter league play with 7 or 8 teams ranked, they're just going to beat each other up and just stay in the polls as well, whereas the Big East is going to be automatically fighting from behind and hoping that knocking off Villanova can propel you up to the polls.
Exactly.
Well, and that's part of the problem because when the deck is stacked from the outset and even from the preseason, that the middling majors of the Big 12 or the Big 10 still manage to hang on to a top 25 ranking, even though they're 8-8 or 10-10 in the conference, and they're still in the top 25. Whereas,
I think Jim's going with the reverse East Coast bias here for the first time in history.
Yeah, Jim, you can't pull the mid-major argument for us. It's I get that argument for the A10s of the world. It just let's face it, they have to win in the out of conference. They have to win. They have to beat the teams because everybody's got pretty decent schedules.
And Purdue can be 20-12 and still ranked in the top 20. Cole, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of this is has to do with as Jack's saying, what these teams do in the non-conference, particularly against the high-profile teams. I'm just looking at St. John's schedule here. They play at Indiana early in the season. Yeah. All right. That's going to be a game with a lot of attention. And if they win that game or do particularly well, that will boost, if you're just talking about polls and the perception around the country. They've got Kansas in December. Yeah. If they win that game, they'll definitely be in the polls, right? That will do it. They've got Pitt late in December. So some of these in Madison Square Garden. So some of these games that'll have more high profile appeal. If you're concerned about the polls, and of course, the beauty of college basketball is you can determine it in the tournament. You don't have to worry about the polls that much. But if you're talking about who can jump in there in the polls, just win some of these non-conference games. Do what you need to do against the teams that are going to be high-profile teams. You've got Seton Hall's got games against Michigan and Ohio State. They'll play
Sure.
either Cal or Florida in Fort Myers. Win the games against these big teams. Texas in the Big East Big 12 battle. Those are the kind of games that they can put you on the map for a season.
Agreed.
That's true. That's true. Who's your top 3 or 4 in the Big East?
Well, number one, obviously, it's Villanova. I don't think anybody on this conversation is going to say otherwise.
Oh, no, hang on. Any sane person on this conversation?
Okay, well,
let's.
I make no guarantees of sanity for any of us.
No problem. That's
but again,
Jack,
I think St. John's and UConn are the next two, and we'll see with Seton Hall. One of my favorite names ever has left Seton Hall in Sandro Mamukalishvili. So we'll see how they handle.
Great player,
fantastic player, and anytime you have to have the broadcaster say that name 15 times a game, it's a good broadcast.
You're doing something. Tristan, top 3 or 4?
Yeah, so obviously Villanova's number 1. I'm going to roll with St. John's 2. I'm a big believer in Kevin Willard. I think he's going to have Seton Hall really good this year. I think they're 3. And Xavier's going to be 4 just on talent. I don't trust the team overall, but when you have Paul Shrugs, Zach Fremantle, and all the wings they have, they should be nothing worse than 4. But I wouldn't be surprised if this league can get 5 or 6 bids, because I think Butler and UConn is going to be good as well.
Yeah. Jack?
Yeah, I'm not too far off there. I think it's Nova. It's a toss-up between UConn and St. John's, and I've got Xavier and then Seton Hall. But, we mentioned we hadn't even talked about Butler. That's a guaranteed loss for Villanova every year. Butler gets them once. Whatever, you talk about matchups. It's, they're always well-disciplined, and that's a team that, gives Nova fits. So Butler can surprise. I think they're going to be there, so that's I think it's a really, aside from Nova and taking my glasses off here, my fandom, that next tier is really balanced. But St. John's is going to be really fun to watch, and his style of coaching, they give people fits. Posh Alexander made Colin Gillespie look more than pedestrian that first game. He ate him up. He got revenge the next time they played, but Posh gave him fits. And he's a star. You're spot on, Tristan. If he becomes consistent from 3, he can get to the hoop almost at will. But if he starts to knock down those threes with regularity, his defense is ridiculously good.
4 bids or 5?
I think 5.
Yeah. Tristan?
I'm going with 5.
Okay. Cole?
Yeah, I think it's 5. But because of the non-East Coast bias, the Big Ten might steal one of those bids away from them.
Okay. Okay. We're pretty much done, fellas.